let's just recap. Where was you the night of the election? Here?
I was sat in this very chair, as the results rolled in, and we were trying to figure out what the exit poll would mean in terms of the majority. And, of course, you saw that big sweeping Labour majority. But, looking back, what strikes me today, Michelle, is something that Peter Thiel, who's a big tech guy in the US, said about the re-election of Donald Trump. Of course, this year also saw that sweeping realignment. And he said, interestingly, if Trump had lost this year, 2016 will forever be seen as the freak outlier. But because Trump won, 2016 will now be seen as the beginning of a new era. And I think the 24 election in the UK, I'm willing to bet, will be seen by historians in the same sense, because I thought what we saw this year was the beginning of the Farage reform revolt, which I think will just get bigger and bigger. We saw the two old parties struggling to captivate enthusiasm. Yes, Labour won, but we all know it wasn't really a vote of big enthusiasm in Starmer's Labour. And the demise of the British Conservative Party, the demise of the Tories. I think 2024 will come to be seen as actually a seismic election that is ushering in this new era of realigned politics.
Where was you on the election night, Bill Rammell?
I was at the count in my former constituency of Harlow, cheering in the new Labour MP. More interestingly was the calling of the general election. I was sitting at home at lunchtime on the day the election was called, and I got a text from GBNews saying, if the election is called this afternoon, will you come into the studio this evening? And I just roared myself with laughter.
Did you?
They're having a joke. And I tell that story because it still beggars belief that Sunak went to the country when he did. And I think majorly he just had enough and he wanted to go to the country. And there was that huge landslide. But I said before the election, Labour would be elected and be the first party to be elected with a landslide, with no enthusiasm. And I think that's part of the problem that Labour is grappling with in government.
When you say huge landslide, I know there'll be many people who'll be watching this in their Christmas festive attire and they'll be shouting and going, well, hang on a second, yes, technically it was a landslide, but of course many people will say only 20% of the electorate there or thereabouts voted in this government.
And that's true, but, you play by the rules, and Labour did get a landslide, but it wasn't with enthusiasm, and that's the challenge that it is facing. But it does have a significant mandate. Now, I'm the first to admit that the first 5 months have not been brilliant. I don't agree with
Understatement of the century.
Well, I don't agree with you, Matt, that 2024 is a seismic election that will lead to the inexorable rise of reform, because I think reform has got a ceiling of about 25% of the vote, because for every one voter that Farage inspires, he repels two, and I don't think there's a sustainable coalition to win the general election.
But it's interesting, isn't it? I remember a lot of people, Bill, saying that to me when they were at 15%. A lot of folks in Westminster would say, well, Nigel can never get over 15% of the national vote. But as we're talking now, December 2024, the polling now, reform on 25%, 1 in 4 voters. Yeah. And I think the one thing about this year, and this is true across the West, actually, not just in the UK, what we've seen this year is the unavoidable fact that what we call volatility in politics, the churn, the chaos, voters switching around like consumers in Sainsbury's, no longer tribally loyal, that's now become this permanent feature of politics. So anything can happen in 2029. A guy said to me yesterday, so you don't really think a new party could win the next general election, do you? And my answer was, actually, I think anything is possible. I think we are where Labour were, Bill, in the early 1900s, when everyone said, well, this little working class party isn't going to overtake the Liberals, is it? And out of nowhere, boom, Labour overtook the Liberals.
I think there are 3 reasons why reform's not going to win the next general election. One is history, and history does matter, and a party has never come from that low to win a general election in one parliament. The second reason is geography. Yes, reform is at about 25% of the vote, but it's spread very thinly across the country. And under first past the post, that doesn't win you your seats.
It's not
the
spread
third
thinly,
reason
Bill.
is organisation. The reform organisation at the last general election was chaotic, and I don't think there's a real sense that it's being pulled together. And finally, if it does look like Farage is moving forward, is in a real contender for victory, he will come under massive scrutiny. And there, the policies don't add up. You know, £70 billion of public spending cuts. Is that what the public wants?
Hang on a second. We're watching Farage hang out with Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, Donald Trump and Mar-a-Lago. Sorry, Bill, but he seems like he's closer to the incoming American administration than the governing Labour Party. I mean, it looks like this guy that you're sort of undermining here looks like he's got better relations with the next president of the US in Keir Starmer.
We will build a working relationship with the Trump administration, but there's no doubt...
Well, we know what Labour thinks about the Trump administration and David Lammy.
And we know what the British people think about Trump. I still think Trump is a significant danger to the American country and to the international community.
I think Keir Starmer's a danger to the British community, if I'm honest, given what he's done with Chagos in China.
Well, we're looking back as part of this programme on some of the highs and lows of this year. Well, of course, it'd be rude, wouldn't it, then, not to look at Labour's first budget. Of course, we saw this. It really did divide opinion, didn't it? Some people say it was great. It had things like your compensation schemes for the postmasters. Those people also a compensation for the infected blood scandal victims. Labour would argue you had extra funding for the NHS and housing and teachers and all the rest of it. And that's really interesting. But the bits that most people will remember are things like the winter fuel allowance cut, farmers' inheritance tax and so on. The bit that I'll remember personally, though, is this.
£22 billion black hole.
The government has inherited a £22 billion black hole in the public finances.
We have inherited a projected overspend of £22 billion. A £22 billion hole in the public finances now. Not in the future, but now. £22 billion of spending this year that was covered up.
In fact, here's a...
See, honestly, it makes me jump to a start then. It almost sends me to sleep, that 22 billion on repeat. It has the opposite effect of what it was intended, I'm sure. It literally just makes people zone off, certainly me anyway. What was your memories, the highs and lows of the budget?
Well, the 22 billion was interesting, isn't it? Because everybody from, Paul Johnson, the head of the respected Institute for Fiscal Studies, through to senior business journalists, have all said this is absolute nonsense. Yes, they have. Yes, they have. Hang on a minute, Bill. Hang on a minute, Bill.
If they knew at the Tory spring budget what they know now, their forecasts would have been materially different. That's as close as the OBR comes to accusing the last government of lying.
I don't know. How many of those little drinks have you had? I'm telling you, because everybody in Westminster knows. Everybody knows the numbers were there in the books. And what Labour are trying to do, I understand why they're trying to do it. I understand the politics. It's not us, Gov. It was the people who came before. But no one's buying it anymore, which is why, as we sit here, December 24, Keir Starmer's ratings, minus 32. Rachel Reeves is basically the same. That's what I'd call Prince Andrew territory in the polling world. Everybody can see through this. And it's about, I think for me this year, it was about the political choices that this Labour government has made. Like, we always knew that Labour were going to be bad with the economy, because Labour are always bad with the economy. The only time Labour's been good with the economy is New Labour, when they inherited much of the legacy of the Conservative administration. But the thing that really got me was the choices. Let's smash British pensioners to save 1.5 billion, while not doing anything with our asylum system, which is costing us 5.4 billion. Let's smash family farms up and down the country to save 500 million. Well, let's give countries around the world 100 million in the misguided hope that it will stop migration upstream. We even just found 11 million quid for Syria out of nowhere. That's about 35,000 winter fuel payments for British pensioners that we could have given. It's just these little political choices that the Labour government has made. And here we are again, big state, low growth, big tax, big regulation economy, with growth rates, Bill. If we come back and do this in 5 years, it's growth rates of 1.5%. Dismal.
The international forecast is that the UK economy will perform amongst the best in the world in the year ahead. Let's come back...
Not over the next 5 years, and what's true and what isn't.
Let's come back to reality. We can have a debate about the size of the black hole, but this Labour government has had the worst fiscal inheritance of any government I can recall in my lifetime. Yes, there was a hole. Yes, there were a whole host of projects that were there, but there was no funding for them. The 30 hospitals that were supposed to be built, not a penny of public funding for them. The commitment to move to 2.5% of GDP for defence, no funding there at all, just a press release. That's what Labour has had to grapple with. Now, we said we wouldn't raise the direct personal taxes on working people, and we did not do that. That means to get the investment that you do need some taxes to go up. And Labour has levied those on businesses and on the wealthy through inheritance tax. I think that is the right choice. And it has delivered 22 billion extra for the National Health Service, £1 billion to tackle homelessness, a record settlement for local government. The key will be the impact of that investment. And as it starts to deliver, I think you will see a change in political
look at what some of the other choices this government's made, because there's a lot there I could take issue with. Here's a little thing that really grinds me, right? Really irritates me. Labour's even removed the requirement that we should prioritise British nationals when allocating social housing. Now, why has it done that? Now, I would argue because
local councils have the ability to make
Labour
that priority
fundamentally is not really about prioritising the British people over other people. That's basically what's happened. So what we've got here for the next 5 years...
I know that's a good slogan, but it's not true.
Well, it's actually what they've done.
The last Labour government, unlike the Tories, significantly reduced asylum and immigration. This government is already beginning to make progress. No. Deportations are at record levels.
Yeah, but record numbers of flights, asylum rates, Bill.
Record numbers of flights, taking people back overseas. You know, deals with countries like Iraq to stop migrants upstream. Yeah. That will begin more and more to have an impact of reducing immigration.
Sure, but this is where we are with the old parties. They're just lying to the country over and over what Labour have done in order to pretend...
Matt, you're an advocate for reform. I understand that.
But I'm an advocate for no political party, but I'm here to say that when Conservatives and now Labour are saying they're controlling the asylum system, let's be honest, this was the year, 24 was the year where immigration became the #1 issue in the country. It's the #1 issue in all the polls. Now,
no, it's not.
It is. It's the issue tracker.
It's not. The economy and living standards are the most important.
No, it isn't.
I acknowledge that immigration is important and it needs to be tackled.
I'm going to just respond to this because when you say we're sending all of these people outside of Britain, not true. What Labour are doing is anyone who's made it to Britain, including those who have arrived illegally, they're giving 2/3 of those people the right to asylum, which is basically like saying to Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam and anywhere else in the world, come to Britain and we'll rubber stamp your rights as well.
Deportations, removing people from this country...
You've removed 6,000 to 9,000.
I've seen a 30% increase.
And you've allowed 60,000...
That is real.
You've allowed 60,000 people to stay.
Yes, because allowing people to come here, not dealing with their claims, illegally, as the last government did, was like a green flag to come to this country, your claim won't be dealt with, you can disappear into the black economy and nothing will be done. We couldn't go on like that.
2024 was the year where, again, everybody lied to the British people.
Well, I can just hear the cheers that have just gone up on the surface on that last statement. I can hear you from here. Look, so many of you have been in touch with me as well, wishing yourselves, each other, a very Merry Christmas. Mike, you're very nice. You said the highlight of his year has been getting to watch us 5 evenings a week. Thank you, Mike. We appreciate that very much.